Hello and welcome to the Career Change podcast. Today I have a very special guest. I'm really excited to speak to her, Maggie Blackburn. And she's made a really bold career pivot from a corporate job in tech. She's been doing that for 10 years and now she made the pivot to plan events, retreats, and building a community. So I'm really excited to hear her story. So welcome, Maggie.
Thanks, Christy. It's great being here. Excited to chat.
Yes. Yeah, so I thought let's dive right in. Maybe just tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then I'm going to start going all the way back to your corporate career.
Yeah, so let's see. I kind of left my corporate career in November, but now I am doing a mix of a variety of different things, sort of building a portfolio career of, creating some of my own events in New York and virtually freelancing in the events space, as well as marketing and taking on some of my own clients in events and retreats. So I've been fulfilling a few different interests and areas after corporate.
Super cool. Yeah. So let's go back to the whole story. Let's start like in your corporate career. What was it that was missing, and what made you want to make a change in your life, in your career?
Yeah, I think it was a few different points of time, I would say. I think, I started my career in consulting at Deloitte, and I actually really loved that portion of time. I love traveling and all of that sort of thing. But I think there came a time where I wanted to try something new and different. And that's when I made my pivot into tech. And I worked at Slack pre-IPO, which was a big change for me, especially in the first year, because learning about just working with different departments and all of that. But it was exciting and fast paced, and I kind of enjoyed that. I think the first hint that I got where I was unsure of what I wanted to do like long term was probably during COVID, like many of us, where I was just working a lot. And I think for me, my excuse was like, there's nothing else to do really. So I'm just going to put my head down and work towards these launches and kind of do that. And I think there was a point where I had been working, woke up in the morning on my laptop and then went to bed, closed my laptop and got into that sort of cycle. And then the launch happened and I just didn't feel like, why was I working so hard towards something? And for me, I felt like I was burnt out and I just needed, to take a break. So I did that. But then instead of like questioning, oh, do I really want to stay in this? What can I change? I sort of just changed jumped from one tech company into a very similar position. And so from there, a few months in, I realized like it wasn't what I wanted to do either. And that's when I started feeling like I can't, I don't see this as my path forever. So I have to change something. But it took me a while to actually like listen to myself and realize that.
So yeah, basically you were kind of keeping yourself stuck, in this corporate world. And what do you think are some of the biggest like emotional mental blocks that were keeping you stuck?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of indecision, making the wrong decision. So, at a certain point, you're working for a few years, or like in my case, 6 years in tech and whatnot, and just wondering what else you would do if you weren't doing this, and if you're going to be happier in the other situation, and kind of just like over analyzing what to do next, basically. So I think there was a lot of that. I think there was also just fear of kind of like money aspect. So losing a stable paycheck, or if let's say I wanted to pivot, like getting a pay cut, maybe I was okay with a small pay cut, but at the same time, at that point when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't want a pay cut. I don't want to sacrifice it. So I had to figure out for me like what was important, and how to get unstuck, I guess, because it was keeping myself stuck in, hey, I was saying to myself, I don't want a pay cut, and kind of all these like fear of making the wrong decision, but I wasn't really moving forward either.
So how did you get yourself unstuck? Like, were there some practical steps that you took to get yourself out of that situation of stuckness, really?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I think one, when I was just sort of in, I would say it was like more the lowest point I was in because, I had like a really difficult conversation with the manager at the time. I was feeling really upset and undervalued at work. And at the same time, I didn't know what else to do. So I just started reaching out to people like on LinkedIn who I thought had interesting job titles or interesting career paths. And I don't remember exactly how I found a few of these different people, but just talking to them kind of helped me understand like, oh, there's a product. I was in product marketing at tech, but an ex-colleague had pivoted her career and was doing that kind of on independent on her own. So I was like, oh, that's one way I could go. Another person that I met randomly started her own like corporate retreats business, and we're still connected today, and that's how I'm working with her after I've left my job. So it was a lot of talking with people who are one step ahead of me, and then at the same time, I was having these conversations, they were recommending like what they did. And one of them
Mhm.
mentioned that they got a career coach. And so I also use the same career coach. And that's where I really think over time helped me a lot because we did a lot of mindset work and kind of challenging my original beliefs and then figuring out how to like take action towards them. So that was a big step for me as well.
What do you think were your biggest mental blocks? What is the biggest things you worked on improving your mindset?
Yeah, I think the um few things that I like, and I was kind of looking at the past when I like my notes from the career coach
Hmm.
previously, but I remember a few of the mindset shifts I made. I think there was a lot of shifts around like, oh, how could I start a business I don't have experience, or how could I, pivot my career into events when I don't have formal events experience. And so a lot of the shifts were like figuring out like, well, I'm good at problem solving. There are examples in the past where I've figured things out without necessarily doing the exact same thing, for the first time. So, kind of thinking in that mindset. And then also with the whole kind of paycheck and getting over the financial fear was a few different steps, like looking at how I viewed money, but also in terms of like the reframe more around thinking about this kind of like as an investment in myself. And a lot of businesses in the first year, or even the ones that are, you might work for startups, things like that, they don't necessarily make a ton of money in the beginning, but you see that it's an investment in the business. And over time, you might make more than you're currently making in your corporate job. And there's no limit really to the income potential versus at a corporate job you kind of always get that answer of, we have a budget and you're at the max of your range and things like that. So I started to see things differently over time after I was challenging those original thoughts of, I'm not going to make the same amount of money at my current or my previous career and all of those other things that were keeping me stuck.
And how did you eventually decide what it is exactly that you're going to do?
So I think that was another big piece for me. I think like for me, I brainstormed so many different ideas and I'm like all over the map, right? There were ideas originally, like maybe because I think one step that happened was I kind of asked friends what I was good at and did sort of a poll on what my skills were and things like that. So I had that information. And I think one theme was I really liked connecting people. I liked sort of designing fun experiences and that sort of thing. But, when I looked at my brainstorm list, there was like matchmaking to like event planning to, it was all over the map.
Yeah.
So I think again, it was sort of a mindset frame of like, I don't necessarily have to choose one specific thing and I can always change my path because I think that was keeping me stuck too. I was like, I have to pick the perfect career that's going to be a perfect blend of like my strengths and make money and also just like something I won't get bored in. But I think that's at least personally for me, I just have always loved doing multiple things. I think that's been a theme at
Mm.
work too, where I talk to my manager and I'm like, oh, I want to do this project or this project. And it might not be in the scope of like my role, but I like taking on that stuff. So I think it was, yeah, just kind of expanding, figuring out like what, like it wasn't just one thing that I had to stick to. I could always change it and mold it and experiment over time.
And when you started doing these different projects, were you still working at your previous company, or did you quit and start cold turkey? Like, okay, I'm going to now start with this, or did you gradually
Yeah.
transition from the one to the other?
Yeah, I gradually transitioned, and I would say it was a mix of like being strategic about it and also just a mix of being a little bit stuck as well. So I think it was smart to stay at the company, even though I was also kind of like, this isn't what I want to do forever. But I think it helped
Mm-hmm.
me, with a paycheck and have that financial stability while I was figuring things out. So I would say like one of the first experiments or things that I did on the side was, my hypothesis was kind of like, I'm a marketer, maybe I'll like marketing, but with other businesses. And I was actually teaching Pilates as well, on the side.
Cool. Okay.
So I asked the Pilates instructor, like, hey, do you need help with marketing? Because I had seen, the website and all these things. And I'm like, there could be room for improvement. So that's basically how I got my first client, and was doing that a
Cool.
little bit on the side while I was doing my full time job, which, even though I'm not doing that specific thing now, I think it helped me build confidence and understand, okay, how do I get a client? How do I onboard the client, write a contract, things like that that were helpful before I left my job. So that's one experiment that I ran while I like had a full-time job.
And if anybody's like listening now who's also curious about building a portfolio career, uh, where do you suggest that they start with this?
Yeah, I think it is sort of doing that audit of what you enjoy doing, what lights you up, and that sort of thing. You may have a few different ideas, like I did, but not being necessarily stuck on one idea or feeling like you have to carry that all the way through. So I think just start with one thing that you're excited about and see what is the smallest thing that you can work towards that goal. So if you are interested in health and wellness, and like want to put on, I don't know, like also like event planning or things like that. Maybe there's something that you can throw at your apartment, or maybe it's like something small that you can just do even virtually and just kind of test out the water, because I think just making those small steps really help over time.
Mm.
One, you're going to learn, but also I think you will just practice, and then over time, your vision, whatever that big vision might be realized, or you realize like, hey, I actually didn't have that much fun doing
Mm.
this. It was a lot of work. And so then maybe you decide to tweak that and do something else, but just really breaking it down into like the smallest little thing that you can do, I think would be my advice. And just like pick something, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, that's what I do with my clients also. I always tell them you don't have to jump into another career and quit your job and like put everything on the line. You can first like test the waters a bit. So do your research and indeed go speak to people on LinkedIn, people who are doing the job that you're interested in. Go talk to them, ask for a virtual coffee date or meet them in person and ask, like, what do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? I have like a quite a good example of one of my clients. She was a project engineer. She really hated her job, working with Excel all day in a corporate behind the desk. And then she thought she would want to become a vet and study veterinarian sciences. So she, through the coaching program, she thought that this is what she wants to do. So she started to research and like ask universities what is needed for this, and start to speak to people who are actually doing their job. And through all this research, she found out, actually, I don't want to do this. Then she was thinking about health and wellness. So she's indeed thinking about all her passions, all the things. And now she actually moved back to her home country because she was living in the Netherlands. She wasn't happy there. And now she started her own Pilates company
Oh,
there,
cool.
funny enough.
Yeah,
And she's loving it. Her whole life has just completely changed. And, she's busy. She's getting clients in. And it's just so cool
it's
to see.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel
So
like it's good, like looking at the lifestyle too, thinking about the lifestyle you want to live. Like to your point around, she was looking at
yes.
veterinary, and that means going into the vet clinic every day, and probably a very different lifestyle than working as a Pilates business owner.
So you can, of course, also first maybe shadow someone or do a project for free or help another department with something just to see if it's even something for you. But I think it's really important to talk to people, to research, to chew a bit on it, to taste a little bit before you just jump into something else.
Yeah, definitely.
And indeed, of course, have either, like, I think everybody's situation is different. Like some people, they have maybe a nice finances saved up, but others, you don't immediately have to quit your job. You can, what I, for example, did myself with my coaching business. I was an air hostess for many years, and only once my coaching business started to get successful and I started getting clients, only then did I stop my flying, my air hostess job, because you don't want to have that stress. But yeah, everybody says different things, because I've also spoken to people who are like, you know what, everything was on the line. I had to make this work because
Hmm.
otherwise I couldn't pay the rent. And that motivated them so much to be successful that they became successful. So I think you need to also know yourself on a deeper level, like very well, like, am I this person who can handle that amount of stress, or is it better for me to slowly transition into something different, which I think most of my clients, they prefer a bit more of the safer route.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like another thing to add to that is like, I think there, if you have a job where you're decent, it's okay, but you're not fulfilled. I think that's a great step to kind of keep that job and experiment with things on the side. I think if you are totally miserable or it's a really toxic work environment, maybe that's a
Mm,
different thing where
yes.
um, then it's figuring out how can you shift things at work, or is it getting like a new manager, or is it transitioning into actually a different company so you can feel at least a little bit happier at work, or maybe it's even just changing your mindset around the whole work situation. But I think for me, I was thinking about, I was at the same company for probably like, yeah, over a year, 2 years maybe, while I was like making this transition. So it wasn't like an overnight thing because I had so much
Mm,
of this fear and kind of feeling stuck and also like stuck to the paycheck. So for me, it was viewing work in a different way, where previously I had viewed it as like kind of like number one priority. It's
mm,
tied very much to my self-worth. Getting promoted, getting a raise, things like that were really important to me, versus kind of like using this and leveraging the job as a way to fulfill other creative interests on the side. So I hadn't viewed it that way, and I think when I
mm.
changed the way I viewed it, I think that also helps me move forward, because if I didn't have a coach, I think I could have quit and maybe ended up in a similar situation, or maybe I don't know what would have happened necessarily. It might have just taken longer. So I think that's just another thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think a lot of women, before they actually start coaching and they don't really know who they are, they actually, a lot of them are living for the outside world. They want to be accepted, be liked, and fit in. They want to make their parents proud. They want to belong to their friends, to their friend group. So if their friends are all lawyers and high up, then they also want to belong and do the same type of thing. So if they find it very difficult to let go of that job title or that specific salary, whatever. But once they start coaching and they realize, but I'm actually not living for myself. I'm living for the outside world. I'm living to please others. And then they actually realize, whoa, but I actually really am not being true to myself. And then when you really start to take off the mask, really, then you start saying, but actually, I want to be doing something completely different. And I think that's where the mindset work is so important, that you realize that it doesn't matter what other people think, that the most important thing is what you think and what you want. And if other people don't agree with that, that's fine. But don't live yourself for other people, because it's never going to make you feel fulfilled in the end.
For sure. And I think one thing that I did too when I was doing this was kind of like writing down my own definition of success. So,
Mm,
like other people write down, or like we live in other versions of success, of that was me too, like working at tech companies and thinking and looking at the job description, scrolling on LinkedIn and being like, oh, this tech company is doing really well. Maybe I should join. And it was very tempting. And so I think I definitely relate to that, and shifting the version of comparing yourself to your colleagues and your coworkers and your friends. And that's also why I think it's important to talk to other people who have made the transition and are
Mm,
thinking a little bit differently, because if you're just talking to your friends about the change and the switch, sometimes they'll try to be helpful, but it's not always super helpful because they're also scared of making a change in their lives too.
100%. Okay, so how was the change for you? Like really making the change from A to B? Like, what did you do when the mindset things came again? The fears, the self doubt, the limiting beliefs. What did you do to deal with that?
Yeah, I think they're always going to creep in, even when you've put in a lot of work on that, and it's just kind of like a practice of walking yourself off the ledge a little bit. But I think again, mine was like a slower transition, so it wasn't like one day I was miserable and the next day I was like free and fulfilled and all of that stuff. But I think for me it was just the action piece, because there's been a lot of instances of and examples now that I can look past or look back to, and that has helped me kind of transform into feeling more confident and excited about work, and more freedom to take on what I want to take on and say no to other things. So I think that has been the biggest piece of just building up more examples where been able to do hard things. So like within those 2 years or whatnot of like transitioning and saying like I don't want to do what I'm doing right now, but I'm not sure what I want to do, to feeling like okay, I'm going to leave my corporate job. It was building up those examples. So thinking about, I had moved to New York maybe a year prior to that. That was something that was really hard for me, that I was scared to do. I use that as an example all the time. I think
Mm.
as another thing that I did in October 2023, I purchased a house, and that was something that
Wow.
I really wanted to do, but financial fear and everything, um, that was another example I used. So then by the time I was leaving my job, there were larger and larger examples of like taking a risk on myself. And so looking back at those really helped me realize, oh, I can figure it out even if things go not perfect to plan. I am a good problem solver. I can figure things out. And,
Mm.
you can always go back to your corporate career if you want money, or there's a lot of different ways. So I think viewing it in that way had been helpful.
And what do you now love about your new career and life? And what do you find maybe unexpectedly hard?
Yeah, I think I like just the mix of doing different things. Again, I never really viewed it this way, as a career that you could just not follow like the one path. So I do some uh, event planning, but I'm also working with companies on marketing as well. And so it's like I don't feel stuck, I guess. I really like
Mm.
that aspect, and I can always change it, and that sort of thing. I think I also like just, yeah, I think when you look back, you're kind of like, oh wow, I did that. Like I'm also traveling for some clients, or get to travel for some clients to do some of these events, and that's something that I really wanted to incorporate when I was thinking about like what career I wanted. I love doing that. I wanted to incorporate that into the lifestyle at work, just traveling a little bit more, like I did when I first started my career in consulting. Like how do I do more of that? And now it's like I went to help plan a retreat in San Diego in January. I'm going to do an event in Florida in June. So I like kind of that aspect. And then in terms of what has been hard, I think it's just when you work for yourself, especially in the beginning, there's like no structure. So it's great, and it's also kind of hectic. So I've had to put a little bit more structure in place and think about like, how do I really actually want to spend my week and that sort of thing, at least in the beginning, thinking through like ideally how that would go. And then sometimes things change. But when I first left my job and I wasn't working at all, the first few months, wasn't really making money. I was just networking
Mhm.
with people. And that was nice. But then at the end, a few months into that, I was kind of like, and starting to work more, I realized it would be nice to have some structure and goals throughout the week so I could stay accountable and do that. But that's the biggest thing. You're kind of on your own in that way. You can talk to other people, but you're your own boss and whatnot. So yeah, just figuring out what works best for you.
I actually like being my own boss.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
different for everyone. I think the freedom is just so amazing that you can decide yourself, when you want to work, from where you want to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, the freedom aspect is like crazy difference. And then for you, how do you define success now compared to in your previous career?
Yeah, I define it, I think, as being like a future example and an inspiration for people who are currently in where I was a few years ago, of feeling really stuck and unfulfilled by their career and their life, and kind of how do I connect those different people together and realize and help them realize that it is possible to make a transition. So I think that's one definition of success. I
Mm.
also think like flexibility and freedom and that sort of thing and is, in alignment with my values. So defining success as, am I able to do that with the work that I'm doing, and kind of like pausing and auditing, like, is that actually true today? And so I think it's a mix of, yeah, being an inspiration to just folks who want to switch their career, make a change in their life, maybe a bigger change in their life, and then also just like the freedom and flexibility aspect of work and life and creating experiences for people.
Yeah, beautiful. And then I'm just curious, were there any other things that really helped you in this journey? Any other resources? Was it just like really coaching with someone that really helped you, or do you feel like you also used other books or courses or other mentors or things to help you on this journey of this big career pivot? Really?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think in the very beginning, I mentioned like LinkedIn, and just you kind of have to curate your search a little bit and stalk people online, but that helped because I was able to talked to a lot of different people who had been a step before me, who have
Yeah.
transitioned from the same role maybe that I was in into something new. So I think that is just a valuable resource and continues to be a valuable resource for me. I also really like some resources around like money and money mindset. So I follow, I think, Barry Tesler's newsletter, who talks more around like money mindset. Ramit Sethi, who is another money coach who has a Netflix show, and all of those things in terms of
Mm,
like financial. Um, so I'm a big podcast person, so also like Mel Robbins podcasts, just looking
yes.
for the episodes that really relate to me. And then in terms of like community and in-person gatherings, I've joined a
Mm,
few. So I'm part of Old Girls Club, which is a Slack community, and that's one that, there's different channels for freelancing, for example, and you can ask a question around something specific or just kind of lurk in the channels and
mm.
look there. And I've been able to connect with a few different people in that community one-on-one, who have like transitioned from corporate to building their own business. And so that's been helpful for connections.
Yeah, I think it's really important to really network and connect with other people who are already doing what you want to do. And yeah, it's just really important to surround yourself with people who've already achieved what you want to achieve, because then
Mhm.
if you like ask questions to people who would be scared of doing that thing, then of course you're also going to be more scared of taking the leap. Whereas people who've already achieved those things, they're going to be like, yes, come along, like you
Exactly.
got this, you can handle this. And I think that's so good for your mindset. And ask those people who've achieved what you want to achieve, how did you do it? How did you manage to do this?
Exactly. And I think, for if anyone's listening to this that is curious about my journey after hearing this too, feel free to reach out to me, because
Yeah.
there has been so many people who have been really generous with just talking to me and my random LinkedIn connection requests and things like that. So people are really generous, especially if you're genuine and authentic in what you're trying to learn, or just kind of asking about their journey and how you can get there. So happy to. talk and share anything that was helpful for me.
Yes. So, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say connect with me on LinkedIn. And then I also have a newsletter. So that's also on LinkedIn if you want to grab it there. But I think those are the best ways to stay connected with me and just say hi.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. It was really very inspiring, and I hope that the people watching or listening are also really inspired to make a change in their life. Any last piece of advice, last piece of words to people who are really feeling stuck in their career and want to make a change?
Yeah, I think, you're not alone in the challenge that you're having, even if it feels like it's really, really hard right now and it feels like you won't be able to do it. I think, just even listening to this is a step forward, or just even reaching out to someone who is in a similar situation or has kind of conquered that situation is a step forward. So, yeah, I think that's how I was feeling at least a few years ago, of just feeling like, oh, why are my friends fine with their careers and I'm the one who's having this quarter life crisis? So you're not alone. And yeah, you're right where you need to be.
I think it's really important to realize that you're not alone. There's so many people that now I'm also realizing how many people are feeling stuck in their career. And, just you sharing your story just shows that you don't have to stay stuck. There's so many possibilities. You can find a meaningful and fulfilling career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you so much
Thank
and
you.
have a wonderful day. And thanks everybody for watching. Until next time.